You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma podcast. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, I've got to thank our sponsors. First of all, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame. They've been a huge part of this podcast for the last few years. So the Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to OklahomaHOF on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatobi for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them. Do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. This episode is brought to you by the Oklahoma State Treasurer Unclaimed Property Division. Oklahoma has more than $1 billion of unclaimed property. Reclaim what's rightfully yours. Visit YourMoney.ok.gov and enter your name to find out if you have lost money from utility deposits, uncashed checks, life insurance policies, or more. If you've got a minute, search for free and visit YourMoney.ok.gov. What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode at the Fields and Futures office today. If you don't already know, or you've been living under a rock and you don't understand what Fields and Futures is, hit the link in the description right now and go check out their website because they're doing incredible things for kids in the Oklahoma City area, which we're going to dive into. It gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the executive director of Fields and Futures, who wears a lot of hats, Mr. David Crynes. David, thanks for having me in the office today.
Oh, thanks for coming. Excited about this.
Yeah, I mean, we've just been kind of chatting. You're getting back into golf, which I love. Love to hear that. As an avid golfer myself, and it's the greatest sport in the world to me. I wouldn't be where I am in any of my positions if I didn't have golf, because everything I can tie everything back to what I've done, back Absolutely. To somebody I met on the golf course or a connection, right? So, yeah, and obviously you can play it until your body says no, which is a lot later than a lot of other sports.
Absolutely. So I'm also a lifelong runner, so that I've got 2 lifetime sports now. And if I can explain the golf situation, Fields and Futures is going heavy into golf this next year. District Athletic Director Eddie Wright has tabbed golf as a sport he wants to grow in the urban core, and so we're going to go all in on golf. Just a week and a half ago, we had a coaches roundtable. We got all the OKCPS golf coaches and athletic directors together for lunch. We just had them lay out there on the table what are some of the obstructions and obstacles that are slowing growth and participation in the Oklahoma City Public Schools, and how can we solve them. We also had First Tee at the table, representatives from that great organization, and then a couple of alums and former golfers from OU and OSU just kind of sit in on the conversation and help us problem solve. So we're excited. We're gonna put some fall events out there to get kids playing in the fall. The OSSA has opened up the fall now for kids to compete, so we're gonna take advantage of that.
Brilliant. Yeah, exciting times. There's nothing better than seeing, especially golf, being and out here compared to back home, it's a hard sport to get into, right? It's very expensive. We're blessed, I think, in Oklahoma City to have such great public golf courses, but there is still this sort of stigma around golf being an elitist sport, and it's not. You just need the access, and that's what you guys can do is equipment and just get in front of a driving range or get on a putting green or what. We don't need massive, we don't need hundreds of acres to build a golf course. We need 2 or 3 to build a driving range.
Absolutely. So, in fact, it was interesting in the last year when Eddie tabbed golf as a sport he wanted to develop. We got a lot of questions from our partners and sponsors and boosters. Why golf? It's so expensive. It's so hard to get into. And our answer is that's exactly why. Yeah. We want to give these inner city kids a chance to pick up a club and swing. So, we're gonna do things like support coaches. So we'll do professional development there, some clinics, bring in some instructors to help them, what they can offer their kids on practices at the driving range. Get them out the first tee. We're gonna solve the issue with greens fees and driving range tokens and of course equipment. So and then we've got to get kids some instructions early on. So we're gonna First Tee does a great job providing instructions in the schools. They're currently in 11 of the 33 elementary schools with their elementary golf program. Right. So kids are swinging a club now as early as pre-K, K, first grade. They're going to double that this year to 22 schools, and then the next year get into all 33 schools. So the idea is that kids are swinging a club from kindergarten all the way till they enter First Tee programs, and then right now there are no middle school teams or programs in the Oklahoma City Public Schools. So we'll help get that built up and running, and then they'll roll right into the high schools. Yeah. So
when you look at Oklahoma State, OCU's golf team dominated the NAIA world when I was in college. You got Oklahoma Christian's done really well in their golf team recently. UCO's doing great. It's why has this taken so long? Right? You're like, why? It makes total sense when you look at how good the elite level amateurs are in this state with the universities. And if you can build this, they don't have to pull from, international schools or wherever, other states to, you're fostering the kids right in your backyard.
Absolutely. I mean, we like to think, or we hear all the time, this is a football state or whatever, but you're right. I mean, golf is strong. College golf is strong here. High school golf is extremely strong in this state. We have great access to courses. So, it does make sense. And, I couldn't be more excited to be part of this. I'm going to use the same enthusiasm I used to build up the Simon Griner track program in golf. The blueprint's there. We're going to do the same thing: support coaches, support kids, provide access, solve the needs, the cost issues, just get more kids playing.
Yeah. So. Before we dive into the weeds, of everything you guys do up until now, let's set some context. Take us back a little bit. What's your Oklahoma story?
So I'm actually born in Indiana, but I grew up in Oklahoma. So my father was a professor at Oklahoma State University. I grew up in Stillwater, two degrees from OSU, and then went to graduate school at University of Kansas. I got my PhD. But that's the first pivot in my life. Instead of becoming a college professor, I decided to go into coaching. So I've been coaching for, I hate to say it's almost 4 decades now, but 30-some years. In high school, when you first start out, you coach just about everything, but I eventually settled in cross country and track. I have an endurance sports background, and so coached high school, cross country and track for 20 years before I moved to the college level. Coached at Oklahoma City University, and then moved out to California and coached for a couple of years at Menlo College, a small school in the South Bay area, about a mile north of Stanford University. COVID shut that down, and out in California, they do that California thing. So they sent all the kids home, canceled athletics. So I came home and chilled out in Oklahoma for a year, and then they did it again for a second year, and I said, it's time to come home. And so I was kind of in between jobs and had some connections with Fields and Futures and Tim McLaughlin, and through a mutual friend was introduced to an opportunity here. And first it was to take over the Simon Griner track program. And the hat there is do anything you can to build running sports in the Oklahoma City Public Schools. So cross country and track. You can find the Simon Griner story on our website. We have a Simon Griner page on the Fields and Futures website. It's a great story. But in the 4 years I've been involved there, we're at 400% increase in participation in those sports. We spend $70,000 a year on shoes for kids. We don't want that to be an obstacle. And that's actually the origin story of the Simon Griner program, was to provide shoes for kids in the inner city. And so, we purchase about 2,000 pairs of shoes every year in the fall for cross country and in the spring for track. Every kid in the fall gets a pair of trainers, and then high school kids on the varsity team get a pair of racing spikes. And then we do the same thing in the spring for track, and that's middle school and high school. So, at this point we've got teams in all 8 high schools in the Oklahoma City Public Schools and all 13 middle schools.
Yeah.
So we've seen tremendous growth there, and that was easy for me. That's my background, that's my passion, that's my focus. So we're going to take that to the golf world now and do the same thing.
Yeah. So. From a young age then, was it always kind of cross country and track and running?
So interestingly enough, my father was one of the original running boom runners in the 1970s. He had run 4 Boston marathons. I grew up going to marathons and 5Ks and doing the mile fun runs. I did not run in high school because I fell in love with a bicycle my sophomore year, watching Tour de France highlight shows on CBS Sports. And that was the first wave of great American cyclists. And I just fell in love with 2 wheels, and that was my passion through high school and college. So rose up the ranks, raced against a guy named Lance Armstrong several times. He was from East Plano down in Dallas. I was from up here, so we would meet a couple times a month. He was an exceptional athlete. He went on to do what he did, the good stuff, and I did not. I went into coaching. So he was a freak talent at that time. I think he was a professional triathlete even already at that point. So and then so I've always been an endurance athlete. I still run marathons. I'm on my 30th marathon. I'm training for a New York City Marathon this November. So just kickstarted that training this last couple of weeks. So
when is New York?
So it is Sunday, November 3rd. So, I will actually miss the cross-country state meet this year for the first time in forever. So, but the chance to run New York City, I've never run there. You can't pass that up. So.
No, you cannot. Yeah. What was it about the bike that kind of just fascinated you?
That's a great question. People in the small subculture of cycling, people will understand this, but CBS did a great job of packaging and marketing and selling the Tour de France at that point. I mean, there was background music, it was highlights. They upplayed all the drama between some of the top cyclists, and I just fell in love with it. I was an alternative sport kid. I did all the traditional sports growing up: football, basketball, baseball, and eventually you figure out whether that's for you or not. And I am totally okay being on my own for 4 hours out there riding or running. That's not an issue for me. I've been doing that for 50 years now, 40 years now, doing a weekend long run or a long ride. I just love that me time, that thinking time. And I love the discipline of the endurance sports. You're focused on your nutrition, your sleep, your prehab. I get in the weight room 3 or 4 days a week. So at this point, it's just who I am, and those are non-negotiables for me. Yeah. So.
What's your favorite Lance Armstrong story to tell?
Well, I'll tell you.
There's a few.
I'll tell you a personal story, and I respect the heck out of the guy. I mean, he did what he did, and he was a bully, but man, he innovated the sport like nobody else had at that point. It was very traditional European sport at that time. I mean, they were eating horse meat and raw whatever, and he just came in and elevated the game. Even before Sir Dave Brailsford did for Ineos and Team Great Britain and Team Sky. But so the first time I saw him, I was in a race in Arkansas. It was a stage race, and I was in a group of the seniors, so 18 and above, and we started probably 15 minutes ahead of the pack of junior riders, and he was a junior rider at that time, meaning 17 and below. And a group of seniors, we're just tooling around through the hills of Arkansas, having fun. It's too early in the race to really start racing. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this freak comes flying by, this pack of older riders, and nobody knows who it is. And we find out later it's a kid out of Plano, Texas, named Lance Armstrong. He had made up 15 minutes on us in no time at all. And we're probably rolling at 23, 24, 25 miles an hour. Mm-hmm. And it's just, I mean, that was my first exposure to that guy. So he was a freak at that time. And I believe this is true, maybe not. I think someone... Maybe he had the highest VO2 max ever measured in an athlete at one time. And I think maybe somebody beat that just recently, but just a freak engine, even before all the bad stuff.
Sure.
So,
yeah. I mean, sadly, right, that clouds everything. But before you look at who he clearly was as a kid.
Yeah.
Like, you knew back then. You know?
So, if you read about him, he had a chip on his shoulder, single mom, rough relationship with a father and a stepfather. Clearly wanted to prove himself, but then you blend in his personality, which is he's an aggressive competitor. And again, he was a state champion swimmer. He was a professional triathlete, I believe, at the age of 16. So, I mean, even before the performance-enhancing drugs, he was pretty exceptional athlete. So
I mean, it's impressive, isn't it? Just like
it is.
And I grew up in Wales, right? Like cycling in the UK is very big. You know, we just had Cavendish do his insane thing, right? At the Tour de France to win 70, is it something?
So he got the record for stage wins.
Which, and I love that clip of the chain coming off at the end because of the power. You're just like that whole end of that race.
He's a beast. That's a great story.
And Geraint Thomas too is obviously big.
Love him.
And then the female side, we've got some great races.
Oh, absolutely.
And cycling is big. They pump a lot of money into cycling back home.
They did.
For the Olympics and stuff.
So, and I believe that. The British still had a great Olympics, but they were down this year. They had a run where they had the most medals, most gold medals of any country for. So it was that whole Sir Dave Brailsford thing about marginal improvements, the 1%. I'm a big fan of his. I've done a deep dive on a lot of his philosophy and sports psychology. So
there's a lot that translates too from the endurance world and being on your own, like you said, out there on a long run or a long ride on a weekend, to business as well and coaching. It's I've done a little bit of typical. You get into your late 20s, early 30s, and like, I'm going to run a marathon. And then I've done the Mid-South 50K a few times now. And just being out there, just like, I'm cooked, right? But I have 5 miles to go, and you go to the pain cave. It's a dark place. You never tell. Dark, you would never tell people the things that you tell to yourself at that moment, right?
Absolutely.
But after you get done with something like that, that's super long, or maybe it's a 5K for someone who's just getting off the couch. Whatever it is, like there's a level for it.
Absolutely.
At every fitness level. Yeah. You feel like you do anything after that.
So First, there's several things there. It can get very dark, and I've had some marathons and some long runs go very, very dark. But you learn so much about yourself in those moments. Like, I'm not going to quit, I've never DNF'd a marathon. I'm pretty proud of that. I'm not the fastest guy out there. I'm coming back from a total knee replacement. So I'm excited to see what I can do at New York, hopefully get back to the Boston Marathon. But you learn so much about yourself on those tests out there because there's nobody can help you. I mean, you can run with somebody that can cheer you on, but you still got to put one foot in front of the other. So, and just there's studies about this, just the free thinking that happens out there. I mean, your brain is stimulated, the endorphins are firing, the dopamine, and you can problem solve. You can get through just about any issue on a long run or a long ride. So, I love that aspect of it.
What was the kind of deciding factor to go coaching versus be a professor?
So I love everything about coaching, and it was hard for me. Like I said, I transitioned out of coaching to come back to Oklahoma. It was in the middle of the year. There weren't a lot of coaching jobs open, so that's how I ended up with Fields and Futures. And I tell people this. I'm pretty open about it. For 2 years, I kept checking job boards, like what whether it was high school or college, but where's going to be the next job? And this job has grown on me so much because it's so impactful. I serve 33,000 kids now in the Oklahoma City Public Schools, about 400 coaches. And so my impact now, now that I'm not directly into coaching is greater than when I was in coaching. But to answer your question about my original pivot from going into academics into coaching is I just felt a need and an urge and a call to work directly with young people. That's a vulnerable time in their lives. And at that time, it was high school. So we're talking about 15, 16-year-olds to 18, 19-year-olds. And I remember I'm a big journaler, and I can take you to the exact page where I wrote this down. I was like, man, there's so many dumb decisions that are made during those years. And if I can be a positive influence for those kids during that time, that's a good legacy. So that was the original draw. I love competition. I love sports. I love all about it. I love X's and O's. I love getting my team ready to go against your team and seeing who comes out the winner. I love that. I love everything about coaching. But really what drew me in originally was the mentorship and the leadership with young people. And I've never regretted that.
Yeah. And so you progress through that, you do high school, and then you go to OCU.
Yeah. So I loved the difference between high school and college. The athletes are just a little bit better, more motivated. There's more discipline. They're still knuckleheads and they make dumb decisions, and I can tell you a couple stories there. But everything's just a little bit more professional from your athletic directors to your staff, your assistant coaches, your trainers. Everything's just a notch up, which I really appreciated, and I would have done that forever. OCU was my dream job. It was a small school, which was my interest in my home state, and I would have done that forever. But Fields and Future's job has just grown all over me, and I love it. But the other thing about college versus high school is you don't have to deal with the parent issues as much. So not that they're non-existent, and then you have other headaches too. You have administrators and deans and admissions and other and of course NCAA or NAIA issues, but it's just coaching college athletes was a joy for me.
Yeah.
They're just capable of a little bit more. So
you can have those adult conversations.
You can have those. Right. Yeah, exactly. The filter comes off a little bit more. You still have to be careful, but I would run, but I always tell people if I can run with our men's team, then we're not a very good men's team. So I would run as much as I could, maybe with the women on their easy days. But when it's time to coach, you coach. Like if you're standing on the track with the side of the track with a sidewalk, that's time with a stopwatch. You're there to coach. So I'm still active. I love interacting with the kids, but there's a time to run, there's a time to coach. So.
Yeah. Well, who would you or was there anybody you kind of emulated your coaching style around?
Wow. That's a great question. So I'm a huge student of leadership and high performance. And so I'll read anything I can, and now I'll listen to any podcast I can. But early on, there was a lot of leadership character stuff. So Mike Krzyzewski at Duke University basketball, he was big for me. John Wooden, legendary coach at UCLA, was good. And I'll read from any sport too. So I read a lot of football coaches, probably not so much baseball, but just I love the leadership aspect of it. And, I love how coaches, program building is I love that. I love coming into a situation where it's a weak program and then flipping it into a winner. That was a real calling for me. But just how do you lead through transition? How do you lead through crisis? That kind of stuff. I was actually the director of leadership at Heritage Hall, and so I developed their whole leadership curriculum and really got into it, brought in speakers. I got to write my own curriculum. But there's so much just cheap stuff out there. You go to the bookstore, if anybody does that anymore, and there's just, 24 golden rules of leadership or 12. And I just love cutting through the BS of that and getting to stuff that really works. So I want to talk to real leaders, successful leaders. I want to study leaders that failed because you can get as many lessons there as you can from people that are successful. But I just love every aspect of leadership and bringing a team through transition, through a crisis, to the top of the mountain, whatever it is. I love the camaraderie. I love the chemistry. It's just everything is a challenge or an opportunity for me when it comes to leadership.
Yeah. So, was there any kind of core principles or building blocks that you literally start with when you walked in? So,
I think you have some of those inherently just through your personality. And I'm a naturally optimistic guy. My dad created that mindset for me. He got me into reading when I was young. I'm very positive. He's 86 years old now, and we'll sit a lot and we just talk about having a positive attitude and how hard it is in this world to have that Pollyannish mindset where everything's going to be okay. In the world today, I should say that everything's going to turn out okay, that tomorrow's a better day. But I refuse to give up on that mindset. So for me, a non-negotiable is a positive mindset. It's very, very hard for me to be around complainers, whiners, negative people, mudslingers, gossips, things like that. I don't have room for people like that in my life. So that's a core value for me, is being a positive. I love innovation. I like thinking outside the box. I think you stagnate if you're not learning and growing. So I think that's a challenge for all leaders, not just coaches, is, what works today is probably not going to work tomorrow, and you need to be ahead of that change. So I'm all the time looking for ideas, and I'll borrow and steal from any industry that's out there, whether it's technology or business or the military, whatever. I'm always looking for leadership principles.
Yeah.
So,
what's your proudest moment as a coach?
Oh, so that's a great question. As a coach, so I've won national championships, state championships. My very first state championship was just, that was special because it was sort of an endorsement that I made the right decision. So funny story, I was actually coaching baseball at that time. And I believe this too, even though I didn't have much of a background in baseball, that leadership principles transcend a subject.
Yeah.
So I've always taught this lesson that you could take a successful person, whether it's a Bob Stoops or a Steve Kerr, and they could lead a business successfully. They could lead a military unit successfully because those principles translate. And so that very first state championship for me, and it was a special, crazy, wild ride. I still get goosebumps thinking about that. But that kind of gave me momentum and traction to keep pursuing what I had a hunch that I wanted to do, and it just took off from there. So,
what was the decision you made?
To get into coaching?
No, you said you made the right decision during that time.
to leave academics, to go be a professor like my dad, or an academic dean, and then to do this crazy thing called coaching. Because it's hard. There's no money in it. It's there's 1,000 reasons why not to get into coaching. Yeah. But my heart was drawn into it. So
that first state championship was track and field?
So I was actually baseball.
Oh, it was baseball.
I was coaching pitchers and catchers at that time, and it was just it was a fun story. A great group of guys. I'm still in communication with a lot of those guys. So, but that was the first one's always special.
That's awesome.
But there was some great. There's a lot of great moments. So, national championships on the track or in cross country. There's just if you coach for very long, you got a book full of memories. So.
Yeah. So what about the opposite way? What about kind of, not to say this is like your worst day, but one of the biggest lessons you learned maybe? Because like you said, when we fail, we learn more.
We do. We learn as much from failure as we do from success, because it's eye opening. And if you don't quit, you're pulling yourself up and you're moving forward. So. There's been one of the very first lessons I learned was a great mentor of mine. His name's Kelly Allen, and he said, this was my very first year coaching, and something had happened in another sport with another coach, and he said the lesson there is nobody's irreplaceable. He said don't ever forget that, and that has always stuck with me. That as good as you are and as successful as you are, you're irreplaceable. The organization will move on. So don't ever get too cocky. Stay humble. Sometimes you got to bite your tongue, even though you disagree with an administrator or a athletic director or boss. Yeah. Even though you convinced in your heart you're right. Sometimes you have to be more mature than that. Yeah. So
sadly, sometimes the coaches are the first ones to go when the team isn't winning. Right?
They are right. Good athletic director, and I've had some great athletic directors. We'll see the big picture though. They'll see the talent level or the challenges or the parent issues, and they'll protect that coach. The weak athletic directors are those are the ones that make life hard.
Yeah. So coming forward, like you mentioned, COVID happens. You're in California. You come home inevitably. You end up staying here and you get hooked up with the guys at Fields and Futures. And because of your track and field background, you start running Simon Granner Foundation. Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that and how that kind of integrates, and then obviously track and field in Oklahoma and beautiful flat land for the most part.
It's flat, but it's high and it's windy and humid. So,
but yeah.
No, so the Simon Griner program was started in memory of Simon, who was an all-state runner from Edmond Memorial. He was undefeated in the 800 and the mile. His senior year, went to University of Tulsa, was an All-American there. Had started mentoring inner-city youth, just sharing his passion for running. And his parents, Don and Shelley Griner, started the program in his honor. And it was one of those deals where after Simon had passed, they put in the paper, in lieu of flowers, please send donations to Fields and Futures. And literally overnight, there was a significant amount of money, like $20,000 just showed up. And I'm like, okay, there's something going on here. And so the Simon Griner program was created within Fields and Futures. So it's an element, it's a column of Fields and Futures. And it started as a shoe purchase program. And it's just grown from there. So we'll do anything now. There's no script, there's no handbook. So I was hired to blow up the program, and so just from my years of experience as a coach, I knew we needed to support coaches. So I started doing clinics. I've had Dave Smith from Oklahoma State, 4-time national champion, come in and speak to the coaches. We had Steve Goley from the University of Tulsa came in, spoke to them. This year we had an all-star team of high school coaches come in and speak to them. So coaches clinics, we do athlete clinics. We support the ACAC, which is the All-City Athletic Conference. That's the district's athletic conference. So we'll support the cross-country championship. We give special awards to the winners, whether it's backpacks or water bottles or just T-shirts, just fun things like that to build up the sport, and in track as well. I started doing rankings, so I created social media for the Simon Griner program on Facebook and Instagram, and I started doing rankings of the ACAC kids, the Oklahoma City Public School kids. So they're not being compared to kids at bigger schools or more competitive schools. They're just being compared within the 8 high schools, and that's become very popular.
And that's based on their times at certain.
It's just so in the fall I'll do cross country times for boys and girls, and they're only ranked against themselves, so they're not being ranked against kids from Deer Creek or Piedmont or schools like that. It's just who's the fastest in the district. And last year was a kid from Douglas High School who's going on to Sterling College to run in cross country and track. So, we created Mile Night 3 years ago with Fraser Leguess at Oklahoma City University. That's become wildly popular. It's in May, the week after the state meet. This year we had a young man that ran the first sub-4 mile on an outdoor track in the history of Oklahoma.
So good.
We hand out a couple of Simon Griner program scholarships that night to kids.
Yeah.
So
is that purely just for high school kids to come out to Mile Night?
So Mile Night is open to anybody. So it starts with middle school or elementary school races, and they actually do 800, but we call it a mile.
Yeah.
And then we had 300-400 people this last year participate. It's gotten bigger and bigger every year. Awesome. There are open races for adults. If you're running marathons or 5Ks, you can get in there. And then elite high school races, middle school, high school races, and then there's a college heat, and then the night finishes with the Simon Griner Elite Mile, and so those are just the top. I mean, you had to be sub 4:15 this year, sub 4:12 to get in that heat, and a kid ran 3:58 this year, so the first sub 4 mile in Oklahoma. On an outdoor track in Oklahoma.
To experience that too, right?
It was just, the video, if you can watch the video from that night of the young man, he's a Oklahoma City athlete from Fresno, California, but if you watch him, we bring the crowd down on the track for that last mile, and to see him coming down the home stretch, it's just
cooking.
It was, it was awesome. So
that's a friend of mine has been watching the Olympics, and he's a basketball guy. He's he ran the half, I think, this year. But he's like, what have we got to do to get everybody together and do a mile? But it's like the joke is like everyone's going to kind of bet on themselves. Like, when you watch TV, like, I can run a sub 6 mile. Yeah, okay, well, let's put $100 down and see what you can do, right? He's like, let's create like the old man type version of it, which would be hilarious.
It's cool because we heat everybody up. So you could be a brand new middle school runner or a high school runner, and you're going to be put in a heat with the whatever your time is, trying to get you a PR to end the year. So if you're a 6-minute miler through your 8th grade year, we may put you in the 5:45 heat to get you a PR. Then we use OCU athletes to pace.
Really?
So it's different from any high school or middle school meet. We use these, you just go on auto. You're not racing. You're just on autopilot. So the OCU athletes will pace you for 2 or 3 laps.
Brilliant.
And then all you have to do is finish. And so it's fun. It's become a celebration. We've got music going. I'm on the mic. I mean, it's just so much fun. We got giveaways. We had a bouncy house going this year. It's
the end of May.
It's the week after the state meet, so it's usually the 3rd week of May.
Okay.
So
I have to remember that. It's
been awesome. 3 years, and it just gets better and better every year. So
brilliant. So then you kind of naturally progress into doing other things. You've been in Fields and Futures for 4 years now, right? So
4 years, 3 years as Simon Griner. The director of the Simon Griner program, but then I also took over I was the lead advocate for all sports. So we'll do anything we can to build up sports participation in the district, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And then just took over the hat of executive director on July 1 of this summer.
Gotcha.
So real quick history. Fields and Futures was created in 2012. Our founder, Tim McLaughlin, and his wife, Liz, took a Wes Welker Foundation bus tour of Oklahoma City Public Schools athletic facilities, and was just appalled with how bad the playing surfaces conditions were throughout the district. So again, 8 high schools, 13 middle schools. I mean, just broken glass, abandoned tires. I mean, the grass was not being mowed. It was dirt. It was just gravel. It was just terrible. And so, he started Fields and Futures to go in and do what the public schools couldn't do for themselves, whether it was because of leadership or because of budgets. He created a private entity, Fields and Futures, a nonprofit, to go in and start to flip those fields. The idea being that if we can create fields that are playable, kids will want to be there. It's proven science. If kids are on teams, they've got a caring adult in their lives. They're held accountable. They've got to be eligible, which means they're going to be in class. They're going to graduate. They're going to go to college, get better jobs. Their life trajectory is changed by youth sports, and so. 10 years later, we're about 70 projects done, about $35 million worth of improvements done, and we've made the pivot away from construction to participation. So participation rates in the district are pretty low. Most of them are in the 20% range. And to put that in perspective, the Aspen Institute estimates the national average for high school participation is about 56%. So if you take all schools, urban schools, suburban schools, private schools, rural schools, about 56% of high school kids are on a sports team throughout the year. Most sports teams in our district, in Oklahoma City, they're around 20 to 30%, and those are the good ones. Yeah. The highest participation sport in our district is soccer. We have a strong Hispanic community, and so soccer is a very popular sport. Mm-hmm. Cross country was a dismal sport with participation rates. We've worked hard to build that up, and golf will be another one that's a big challenge. But we're getting behind every sport at this point. We've created a cheer program. We have a team member here at Fields and Futures, Mandy Dotson, that's done a great job building up cheer, putting on ACAC championships. She just had a cheer clinic 2 weeks ago with about 300 young people that participated in a preseason cheer clinic. So soccer, futsal, golf, cross country and track, those are the sports we're behind. We're also going to get into some tennis. Eddie has identified swimming as a sport he wants to pursue. Eddie being Eddie Wright, the district athletic director. So he's in the process of hiring swim coaches for his high schools. So, the thought is pretty simple. Let's get kids on teams. Let's get them off streets.
Yeah.
So all kinds of good outcomes when they're on a sports team.
Was the pivot away from building because there wasn't a need, and not as much of a need anymore because you guys had built? Because you guys have built some fantastic spots.
There's always a need, and weekly we get requests from coaches or athletic directors saying, "Hey, we need, can you come work on our baseball field or our soccer pitch or our track?" And it's like, it was a philosophical decision by the organization, the board, and Tim McLaughlin. Like we've done a lot. It's very expensive. Like I said, $35 million over 10 years. It's a special kind of donor that can come in and help on those kind of projects. It's labor intensive. It's cost intensive. So I think the decision was just made that we've done a lot with fields. Let's make sure we're getting kids on those fields now.
Gotcha.
And so we're all in on participation, on coaches. I tell people all the time, you can have the best fields in the state, but if you don't have caring, charismatic coaches, kids aren't going to play. So that's a big part of what I do is to build up the coaching culture in the Oklahoma City Public Schools. So we did. Now I need to point out we did create an endowment to make sure those fields are going to be maintained for the next 25 years. So we've created over a $10 million endowment, which will support maintenance of those fields for the next 25 years. So we didn't just build them and then leave them.
Yeah.
So no matter who's in charge of Oklahoma City Public Schools or OKCPS athletics, there's always going to be fields and futures, and there's always going to be support there to get those fields maintained and taken care of.
Yeah. Were you aware that the participation was as low as 20% compared to the average?
Well, once we started in the last 4 or 5 years, once we started looking into it, it became pretty obvious. And so, urban districts run behind suburban participation rates. So we have to be careful that we're not comparing ourselves. We want to compare apples to apples. So we're still below national averages for urban cores. Tim likes to say this is bigger than a Fields and Futures story or even an OKCPS story. It's an Oklahoma City story. If we get more kids graduating and going on to productive lives, then there's all kinds of positive outcomes. They're taxpayers, they're making contributions, they're engaged in community service, and of course they're avoiding negative outcomes that is a money suck too. So everything from prisons to rehabs to you're avoiding all those costs. And so we've contracted Dr. David McLeod. He's the interim director of the School of Social Welfare at the University of Oklahoma, and he's helping us produce some really interesting nuggets. And I'll just throw out a couple. One, for every 1% increase in graduation rate, so 1% increase in graduation rate across the district has a $5 million impact on the local economy. So it makes sense. Let's get kids graduating. Let's get them in class. And the way to do that, we feel, is get them on teams.
And that 1% not a big number.
It's not. Yeah, it's not.
It's when you put it on paper, you're like, it's not that. It shouldn't be that hard.
1%. And we can run the numbers because we know there's 33,000 kids in the district. But another one he gave us this last year, an athlete was in class on average 22 more days than a non-athlete. So think about that.
Yeah.
Because you're on a team, you're held accountable by an adult, by eligibility, whatever the reason is. You don't want to let your teammates down. I don't care. An athlete is in class 22 more days on average than a non-athlete. That's huge. So we've chosen sports, and it could be anything. It could be chess club. It could be the arts, theater. It doesn't matter. But for Fields and Futures, it's sports. And so that's our vehicle. That's our platform. If we can get kids in class on average 22 more days a year, on an average of, I think the state legislature mandates 174 days. Think about that. 22 days out of 174. That's a significant amount of learning. So that's why we're all in. Yeah,
not to mention the stuff that we know as, being around sports our entire lives is just the social side of it. The friends that you meet, the lifelong friends that you meet. Yep. From being on a team together, or golf is specifically quite an individual sport, but you're still part of a team. You are. You still got to practice every day with the same group of guys and girls. Like, it's those relationships that are built.
Well, some of those lessons are cliche, but they're not. Like you said, the teamwork, working with different personalities, struggles, challenges, everything that every cliche that's on a poster or on a website for sports there's a nugget of truth to them. And so there's so many great life lessons there. And as you talk about with golf, it's the same thing in my world, track and cross country. It's an individual sport, but you're part of a team. You got to carry your own weight. You got to be disciplined in your nutrition, your sleep, your training. And if you don't, you're not only letting yourself down, you're letting your teammates down. So, and that appeals to me, the individual aspect of a team sport.
Yeah. So finishing up, fall sports is coming up. Obviously cross country is a huge part in the fall, and other sports as well. What are you guys looking forward to in the fall, and how can people listening get involved and help out?
Yeah, so fall's big. Everybody's excited, back to school. You can just feel a positive vibe around Oklahoma City Public Schools this year. There's new leadership. Sean McDaniel was a great leader for 6 years. But Superintendent Polk has come in and just she's supercharged the district. Athletics is on fire and ready to go. So fall sports, cross country, football, softball, volleyball, all getting started. a couple of things we'll do in my world with cross country is we're going to send an all-star team over to the Chili Pepper Cross Country Festival. Again, that's at the University of Arkansas at the end of September. We'll put those kids up in a hotel. We'll provide food money, and they'll get to go participate in one of the best cross-country meets in this part of the country. So we got our shoe distribution coming up here in a couple of weeks where we'll outfit, probably 700 or 800 kids that are going to participate in fall sports, cross country. And so, it's a good time, being in education, being in coach my whole life. I just love the return to school. Energy comes back on campus. I mean, teachers and administrators are generally recharged and refreshed and ready to go. And at this point, I like to, when I go speak to coaches, I say, everybody's undefeated at this point. Everybody's in the running right now for state championships. So nobody's got any losses yet. So let's hook it up and let's go. So if people want to get involved, hit fieldsandfutures.org, our website. There's ways to get involved there. There's a donate page. We're always looking for supporters and donors. And then there's a Simon Griner page on the Fields and Futures website. And if you're really interested in cross country and track, you can get involved in that way. But if you have a sport, we can hook you up with a sport. So if it's golf, football, baseball, soccer, whatever, we can channel your funds that way. If it's a school that you want to adopt, if it's a theme like girls in sports, that's become a push in the district here in the last year. We can get you connected that way. So whatever your passion is, whatever you feel, where your heart leads you, we can get you connected.
Brilliant. Well, David, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your great stories, and I'm glad that you came back from California.
Oh, well, yeah, I'm glad to be home. This is home and always will be. So I appreciate you. It's been fun. Good
luck in New York. Can't wait to see that time. And
Pressure.
I'm definitely going to come out to the Mile event next May. It's going to be incredible.
You need to.
For people listening, I'll put the links to the website down in the description. You can go check that out, Fields and Futures, and we will catch you next episode. Cheers. Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at OklahomaHOF. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state, and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. This episode is brought to you by the Oklahoma State Treasurer Unclaimed Property Division. Oklahoma has more than $1 billion of unclaimed property. Reclaim what's rightfully yours. Visit YourMoney.ok.gov and enter your name to find out if you have lost money from utility deposits, uncashed checks, life insurance policies, or more. If you've got a minute, search for free and visit YourMoney.ok.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.